Before we begin tonight's terrifying true story, I want you to think about the last time you were alone in a familiar place at night. Maybe it was walking to your car after work, or being alone in your house when everyone else was asleep. That feeling of safety can change in an instant when something doesn't feel right. Tonight's story comes from someone who experienced exactly that, an ordinary situation that turned into a nightmare. As I tell you this story, remember that this really happened to a real person, and it could happen to anyone. The most frightening experiences often occur in the places we feel safest. I inherited my grandmother's house in the fall of 2019. She had passed away 2 years earlier, and the house had been sitting empty ever since while we worked through the estate. My parents lived 3 states away and didn't want to deal with it, so the responsibility fell to me. I was 32 years old, living in an apartment in Cleveland, and honestly, I needed to figure out if I wanted to keep the place or sell it. The house was in a small suburb outside Toledo, about 2 hours from where I lived. It was the house where I'd spent every summer as a kid, where I'd celebrated holidays, where my grandmother had lived alone for 15 years after my grandfather died. I decided to spend a weekend there in October to sort through her things and get a feel for the place. I took Friday off work and drove out Thursday evening, arriving just as the sun was setting. The neighborhood looked exactly as I remembered it. Modest ranch houses built in the 60s and 70s, well-maintained lawns, basketball hoops in driveways, but something felt different driving down that familiar street. Maybe it was the for sale signs in several yards, or the way the trees had grown taller and blocked more of the streetlights. The whole area felt darker than I remembered. I pulled into the driveway and sat in my car for a moment, looking at the house. It was a typical Ohio suburban ranch. Brick facade, attached garage, small covered porch. The grass had been mowed by the lawn service we'd hired, but the flower beds my grandmother had maintained so carefully were overgrown with weeds. The windows were dark. I'd called ahead to have the utilities turned back on, so I knew there was power and water, but seeing those black windows made my stomach tighten. This was the house where I'd felt safest as a child, where my grandmother had made me pancakes and let me stay up late watching old movies. Now it just looked abandoned. I grabbed my overnight bag from the back seat and walked to the front door. The key was where my mother had told me it would be, hidden under a fake rock near the porch steps. My grandmother had always kept that spare key there, even though I'd told her a dozen times it wasn't safe. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, reaching for the light switch I knew would be right there on the wall. The lights came on, flooding the small entryway with harsh brightness. The house smelled wrong. Not bad exactly, just stale and closed up, with an underlying scent of old fabric and dust. Everything looked smaller than I remembered. The living room furniture was still arranged exactly as it had been. My grandmother's floral couch, the coffee table with its collection of Reader's Digest magazines, the entertainment center with the old tube television she'd refused to replace. But there was dust on every surface, and the air felt thick and undisturbed. I walked through the house room by room, turning on lights. The kitchen still had her dishes in the cabinets, her magnets on the refrigerator. The bathroom had her towels hanging on the racks, though they were stiff and musty now. The 2 bedrooms looked frozen in time, my grandmother's room with her quilted bedspread, and the guest room where I'd always slept, with the twin bed and the dresser covered in my childhood drawings she'd kept framed. I decided to sleep in my grandmother's room. The guest bed seemed too small now, and something about sleeping in that room where I'd been a child felt wrong. I made up my grandmother's bed with fresh sheets I'd brought from home, trying not to think about how this was where she'd died. Not in this bed she'd died in the hospital, but in this room, in this house that had been her entire world for so many years. By 9 o'clock I was exhausted from the drive and the emotional weight of being in the house. I made a sandwich from the groceries I'd brought, ate it standing at the kitchen counter, and then brushed my teeth and got ready for bed. The house was so quiet. I'd grown used to apartment living, where you could always hear neighbors or traffic or something. Here there was nothing but the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the house settling. I was lying in bed, scrolling through my phone, when I heard it. A voice, faint and indistinct, but definitely a voice. It sounded like it was coming from somewhere in the house. I sat up, my heart suddenly pounding. I listened hard, holding my breath. There it was again. Not words I could make out, but the unmistakable sound of human voices, and then something that sounded like canned laughter. A television. Someone had left a television on. I got out of bed and walked into the hallway. The sound was clearer now, definitely coming from the basement. The basement door was at the end of the hallway, and I could see light coming from the crack underneath it. I stood there for a long moment, trying to rationalize what I was experiencing. Maybe the TV had been left on 2 years ago. Maybe it had some kind of timer, but we'd had the power shut off. There was no way it could have been running this whole time. I opened the basement door. The wooden steps led down into darkness, but I could see the blue glow of a television screen reflecting on the concrete wall at the bottom. The sound was clear now. It was definitely an old television show, something with a laugh track. I recognized the cadence of it, that distinctive 60s sitcom rhythm. My grandmother had always watched those old shows on the TV she kept in the basement, in the little rec room area my grandfather had finished when they first bought the house. I flipped on the basement light switch and started down the steps. Each wooden step creaked under my weight. Sounds I remembered from childhood. At the bottom, I turned the corner into the rec room. The calm television was on, glowing in the dim light from the single bulb I'd turned on at the top of the stairs. It was my grandmother's old cathode ray TV, the one she'd bought in the early 90s and refused to replace even when flat screens became common. The screen showed a black and white sitcom I didn't recognize. People in 60s clothing sitting around a dinner table, laughing at something one of them had said. My grandmother's recliner sat in front of the TV, positioned exactly where she'd always kept it, with her Afghan blanket draped over one arm. For a disorienting moment, I almost expected to see her sitting there, but the chair was empty. The TV remote sat on the armrest, where she'd always left it. I picked up the remote and turned off the television. The sudden silence was overwhelming. I stood there in the basement, my heart still racing, trying to think through what had just happened. The power had been off for 2 years. I'd had it turned back on today, but there was no way this TV could have been programmed to turn itself on. And even if it had been, what were the chances it would come on at the exact channel my grandmother always watched, playing the exact kind of show she used to fall asleep to every night? I checked behind the TV. Everything was plugged in normally. The power cord, the cable line. The cable shouldn't even be active. We'd cancelled that service 2 years ago, but the TV had definitely been showing something. I turned it back on with the remote. Static. I flipped through channels. More static except for a handful of local broadcast channels showing current programming. Nothing like the black and white sitcom I'd just seen. I turned off the TV again and went back upstairs, closing the basement door firmly behind me. I tried to convince myself there was a logical explanation. Maybe some kind of electrical surge. Maybe the TV had been picking up some weird signal, but my hands were shaking as I got back into bed, and I left the bedroom door open so I could see down the hallway to the basement door. I didn't sleep well. Every sound in the house seemed amplified. The furnace clicking on and off, the refrigerator humming, the subtle creaks and groans of an old house. Around 2 in the morning I heard it again, the faint sound of voices and canned laughter from the basement. This time I didn't get up to check. I lay in bed, covers pulled up to my chin like I was 10 years old again, and I waited for morning. When dawn finally came, I got dressed quickly and went downstairs. The basement door was still closed. I opened it and looked down. No light, no sound. I made myself go down there in the full daylight streaming through the small basement windows. The television was off. The recliner sat empty. Everything looked completely normal. I decided to start going through my grandmother's things, trying to distract myself from the strangeness of the night before. I began in the basement, figuring I might as well start where I was. The rec room had built-in shelves along one wall, filled with old books, knickknacks, and boxes of family photographs. There was a cabinet beneath the TV that I knew contained my grandmother's collection of VHS tapes. She'd recorded her favorite shows for years before she finally figured out DVR. I opened the cabinet and pulled out the first box of tapes. They were labeled in my grandmother's handwriting. Dates, show names, special occasions. I found myself reading through the labels, memories flooding back. Then I saw a tape that made me pause. The label read Family Dinner, Thanksgiving 1995, in my grandmother's careful script. I remembered that Thanksgiving. I would have been 9 years old. It had been at this house, the whole family together. I pulled out more tapes. Christmas 1997. David's birthday 1993. Summer visit 1998. My grandmother had recorded these family gatherings, something I'd never known she did. I found myself wanting to watch them, to see those memories preserved on tape. I looked at the VCR under the TV. It was old, but it might still work. I plugged everything in and slid the Thanksgiving 1995 tape into the VCR. Static appeared on the screen, then shaky home video footage. I recognized my grandfather behind the camera. I could hear his voice giving instructions to everyone. The camera panned across the dining room table. There was my grandmother, younger, her hair not yet completely grey. There were my parents, looking impossibly young, my uncle and aunt. And there at the end of the table was me, 9 years old, wearing a sweater my grandmother had made for me. But something was wrong. As the camera panned across the table, I saw someone else, someone sitting between my mother and me, a woman I didn't recognize. She was in her 50s maybe, with dark hair pulled back, wearing a navy blue dress. She was smiling at the camera, raising her glass as my grandfather made a toast. She looked completely natural, like she belonged there, but I had absolutely no memory of this person. Who was she? Why was she at our family Thanksgiving? The video continued. I watched myself as a child, laughing and talking, completely normal. But this strange woman was in almost every shot. Sometimes she was talking to my mother. Sometimes she had her hand on my shoulder. In one shot, she was whispering something in my ear, and I was nodding seriously. I ejected the tape and grabbed another one. Christmas 1997. I fast-forwarded through it looking for the woman. There she was again, this time sitting on the couch next to me while I opened presents. She was handing me something, a wrapped gift. I saw myself on screen taking it from her, excited, thanking her. But I had no memory of this, none at all. I went through tape after tape, my hands trembling now. The woman was in every single one, at my birthday parties, during summer visits, at Easter dinner. She was always near me, always interacting with me, and everyone else in the family treated her like she was supposed to be there. My parents talked to her. My grandmother hugged her, but I couldn't remember her at all. Then I found a tape that was different. The label just said, David, July 1994, with a question mark. Nothing else. I put it in the VCR, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The video started. It was filmed in this basement. I recognized the wood paneling, the same furniture. The camera was stationary, set up on something pointed at the couch. And there I was, 7 years old, sitting on that couch. I was alone, talking to someone off camera. I could hear myself clearly on the tape. When will I see you again? My 7-year-old self asked. There was a pause. Then a woman's voice responded, soft and kind. Whenever you need me, David, I'm always here. But Grandma says you have to go away sometimes. That's true, but I always come back. You know that. The child version of me nodded. I know. I just miss you when you're gone. I miss you too, sweetheart. But remember what we talked about keeping our special times just between us? I remember. I won't tell. That's my good boy. The video continued for another minute. Just me sitting there on the couch talking to this person I couldn't see, talking about things I had no memory of, making promises to keep secrets. The woman's voice was gentle, patient, loving, and absolutely unfamiliar to me. The tape ended abruptly. I sat there on the basement floor, staring at the blue screen of the TV, trying to process what I'd just seen. There was someone in my childhood that I'd completely forgotten, someone who'd been at family gatherings, who'd been close enough to whisper to me and give me gifts and film private conversations with me in this basement, someone the whole family had known, and I couldn't remember any of it. I looked through the rest of the tapes in the box, looking for more videos of just me and this woman, but there was nothing else like that. Just the family gatherings where she appeared in the background, always near me, always watching me with that same gentle smile. My phone rang, making me jump so badly, I nearly knocked over the stack of tapes. It was my mother. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hey honey, just checking how it's going at the house, she said. Getting settled in, okay? Mom, I said, my voice shaking. I found some old family videos. Oh, that's nice. Your grandmother loved recording things. There's a woman in them, in all of them. At Thanksgivings and Christmases, at my birthday parties. Dark hair, usually wearing blue. Who is she? There was a long silence on the other end. So long I thought the call had dropped. Mom? David, my mother said carefully. What exactly did you find? Videos from when I was a kid. This woman is in all of them. She's sitting next to me, talking to me, giving me presents. But I don't remember her at all. Who was she? Another long pause. Then my mother spoke again and her voice had changed. It was tight, controlled, like she was fighting to keep it steady. David, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I need you to pack up your things and leave that house right now." "What? Why? Just tell me who she was. Please, just leave. Drive back to Cleveland. Don't spend another night there." "Mom, you're scaring me. What's going on?" I heard her take a shaky breath. "The woman you're seeing in those videos. We don't talk about her. We haven't talked about her since you were 10 years old. Your grandmother made us promise never to bring her up, never to remind you about her." "Why? Who was she?" "David." My mother's voice cracked. "There was no woman. There was never a woman at those gatherings. It was just family, just us." The basement suddenly felt very cold. "What are you talking about? I can see her. She's right there in the videos, sitting next to me, talking to me." "I know what you think you're seeing," my mother whispered. "But David, we've watched those same tapes years ago before we packed them away. There's no woman in them. There never was." I looked at the TV, at the VCR, at the stack of tapes around me. "That's not possible. I just watched them. She's in every single one." "Please," my mother said, and now she was crying. "Please, just leave. Your grandmother. There were things that happened in that house, things we couldn't explain, things that stopped when we took you away. We thought it was over. Please don't make us go through this again." My hands were numb. The phone felt slippery in my grip. "What things?" "You started talking to someone who wasn't there. When you were about 6, you'd have whole conversations with empty rooms. You'd say she was your friend, that she visited you when you stayed with Grandma. We thought it was an imaginary friend at first, but then—" She paused, breathing hard. "Then you started knowing things you couldn't." "Those, things this friend had told you? Private things about family members? Things that happened before you were born. And you started saying she wanted you to stay with her, that she was sad when we took you home." The rec room felt like it was tilting. I reached out to steady myself against the shelves. "We took you to doctors," my mother continued. "Therapists. They said it was just an active imagination, that you'd grow out of it. But your grandmother knew better. She'd been experiencing things in that house for years. Doors opening on their own, her TV turning on in the middle of the night, sounds of someone walking around when she was alone. She'd learned to live with it. But when it started focusing on you, when it started trying to keep you there, we had to stop bringing you to visit. But I kept coming here," I said. "I remember spending summers here until I was a teenager." "No, honey. Your last visit was when you were 10. After that, Grandma came to visit us instead. You don't remember because we didn't want you to remember. The therapist said it was better to let you forget, to not reinforce the delusion. And you did forget, completely, until now." I looked at the VCR, at the tape still inside it. If there was no woman, then who was I talking to in that tape? Who was I looking at? My mother's sob came through the phone clearly. "We don't know. We never wanted to know. We just wanted to keep you safe. Your grandmother, she felt so guilty. She thought something in that house had attached itself to you, something that had been there long before she moved in. She made us promise to never let you go back there alone." "Mom," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "the TV turned itself on last night. In the basement, it was playing some show from the 60s, the kind Grandma used to watch." "Oh God, David, please. Please leave right now. Get in your car and drive away. Don't stop. Don't look back. Just go." That's when I heard it. A sound from upstairs. The sound of the front door opening and closing. Footsteps in the entryway. Someone was in the house. "Mum, someone just came in." "No," she said. "No, David. There's no one there. Listen to me. Do not go upstairs. Go out the basement door, the one that leads to the backyard. Go now." But I couldn't move. The footsteps were moving through the house. I could hear them directly above me, in the living room, then the hallway. They were coming toward the basement door. Slow, deliberate steps. The kind of steps my grandmother used to make when she was having trouble with her arthritis, carefully placing each foot before taking the next step. "David!" My mother was screaming now. "Get out!" The basement door opened. I could hear it from where I stood, frozen at the bottom of the stairs. I could see the rectangle of hallway light at the top of the steps. A shadow fell across that light. Someone was standing there. "David?" A woman's voice called down, soft and kind, and absolutely familiar, even though I knew I'd never heard it before in my life, except on that videotape, talking to my 7-year-old self. "David, sweetheart, is that you? I've been waiting for you to come back. We have so much to catch up on." I dropped the phone. I could hear my mother's tiny voice still screaming at me to run, but I couldn't make myself move. The shadow at the top of the stairs shifted, and slowly, someone started descending, one step at a time. The same careful arthritic steps I'd just heard above me, I finally broke free from my paralysis. I turned and ran for the basement exit, the door that led to the backyard. I grabbed the handle and twisted. It didn't move. I tried again, pulling hard. It was locked, and I couldn't remember where my grandmother kept the key. I spun around. The footsteps were halfway down the stairs now. I still couldn't see who it was. They were moving too slowly, still hidden by the turn in the staircase. "Don't run from me," the voice said. "You used to be so happy to see me, don't you remember? We were such good friends." I backed up against the locked door. There was nowhere else to go. The rec room had no other exits. The small basement windows were too high and too small to crawl through. The footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs. She stepped around the corner into view. It was the woman from the videos, exactly as she'd appeared in those tapes from the 90s, the same dark hair pulled back, the same navy blue dress, the same gentle smile. She looked exactly the same as she had 25 years ago. She hadn't aged at all. "There you are," she said, and her eyes were so warm, so loving. "I knew you'd come back eventually. This is your home, David. You belong here with me. You always have." She took a step toward me. I pressed harder against the door. "Who are you?" I managed to ask. "You know who I am," she said softly. "Deep down you remember. I've been part of this family for so long. I was here before your grandmother. I'll be here long after, but you were always my favorite. From the first moment I saw you as a baby, I knew you were special. I knew you could see me, hear me, when others couldn't. We had such beautiful times together, didn't we?" "I don't remember," I said. "I know. They made you forget. They took you away from me. But you came back." She moved closer, reaching out one hand toward me. "And now you'll stay, like your grandmother did." She understood in the end. She knew this house. This place. It's where some of us need to be. It's where we're meant to be. Her hand was inches from my face. I could see every detail of her, the lines around her eyes, the texture of her dress, the way her hair caught the light. She looked completely real, completely solid, but I knew with absolute certainty that if she touched me, something terrible would happen, something irreversible. I did the only thing I could think of. I screamed. I screamed as loud as I could, and I threw myself sideways, away from her reaching hand. I stumbled past her toward the stairs, nearly falling. She turned, that smile never leaving her face. "David, don't be afraid. I would never hurt you. I love you. I've always loved you." I ran up the stairs, taking them two at a time. I could hear her behind me, those slow arthritic steps speeding up, trying to follow. I burst through the basement door into the hallway and ran for the front door. My car keys were in the bedroom. I couldn't get them. I just had to get out of the house, get away. I threw open the front door and ran outside into the early morning light. November air hit my face, cold and sharp and real. I ran down the driveway to the street, then turned back to look at the house. I could see her in the living room window, standing there perfectly still, watching me. She raised one hand and waved, a small, sad wave, like she was saying goodbye to a child leaving after a visit. I ran to my neighbor's house, old Mrs. Patterson, who'd lived next door to my grandmother for 40 years. I pounded on her door until she answered, wrapped in a bathrobe and looking terrified. I must have looked insane. No shoes, no coat, probably white as a sheet. I begged her to call the police. I said someone had broken into my grandmother's house. The police came. They searched the house top to bottom. They found nothing. No signs of forced entry. No evidence anyone had been there except me. My car was still in the driveway. My things still in the bedroom. They asked me if I'd been drinking, if I'd taken anything. They were kind but skeptical. They told me it was probably just stress, grief over losing my grandmother, being alone in an empty house. They offered to call someone for me. I called my mother. She drove the 2 hours from Cleveland with my father. When they arrived, they found me sitting in Mrs. Patterson's living room, drinking tea I couldn't taste. My mother took one look at my face and started crying. "I'm so sorry," she kept saying. "I'm so sorry." My father went to the house and packed up my things. He loaded them in their car. Then he went back and I watched him go into the basement. He was down there for 20 minutes. When he came back up, he was carrying a box of VHS tapes. He took them to their car and put them in the trunk. He didn't say anything about what he'd seen on them. We put the house on the market the following week. We priced it to sell quickly, below market value. It sold in 3 days to a developer who tore it down and built 2 new houses on the lot. I don't know if whatever was in that house is still there, in that spot where my grandmother's house used to stand. I don't want to know. I never went back. I never watched those videos again. My parents still have the box of tapes somewhere, I think, hidden in their attic. They've never told me what they saw on them, whether the woman was there in the tapes for them, or whether they saw what my mother said they'd always seen. Just family, no stranger, me talking to empty space. Sometimes I dream about the basement, about the TV turning on by itself, showing programs that don't exist anymore, about the sound of those careful footsteps on the stairs, about her voice calling my name so gentle and loving and absolutely wrong. In the dreams, I always turn around and go back. I walk down into that basement, and I sit in my grandmother's recliner, and I stay there. I stay there, and I wait for her to come back, because part of me remembers now, even though I don't want to. Part of me remembers how it felt to have that attention, that absolute focused love from something that wanted to keep me there forever. Part of me remembers why they had to make me forget. I'm 35 now. I live in Columbus, as far from that suburb of Toledo as I can get while staying in Ohio. I don't have children. I don't think I ever will, because I can't stop thinking about something my mother told me. During that long drive back to Cleveland, she said that whatever was in that house, it had been there since before my grandparents bought it. The previous owners had sold it quickly, below market value, after their daughter developed an imaginary friend that wouldn't leave her alone, and the owners before that had lost a son who disappeared one night from his bedroom and was never found. The house is gone now, torn down, replaced with new construction, new families living there, new children, playing in yards that cover the footprint of my grandmother's basement. I wonder sometimes if they're safe, if destroying the physical house destroyed whatever was in it, or if it's still there, waiting underground, watching those new children, looking for one who can see it, looking for one who will remember. I sold the house, but I never got rid of that feeling, that sense of being watched, of knowing that somewhere, something is disappointed I got away, something that invested years into me, that waited patiently for me to come back, something that thought I belonged to it. I still get postcards sometimes. They show up in my mailbox, addressed to me in handwriting I don't recognize, but that feels familiar. They're always from Toledo. They never say anything except missing you and come visit soon. I throw them away immediately, but they keep coming, every few months, just often enough that I can never quite forget. And sometimes, late at night, I'll be watching TV and the channel will change by itself, just for a second, just long enough for me to see a flash of black and white, a 60s sitcom, canned laughter. Then it's back to normal, like someone is reminding me they're still there, still waiting, still patient, because after all, what's time to something that's been waiting for decades, watching generations of children grow up in that house? What's a few more years to something that believes, with absolute certainty, that I'll eventually come home? I've thought about moving out of state, starting over somewhere far away, but I'm afraid that won't matter, because it wasn't about the house, not really. It was about me, about something that recognized me as a child, that marked me as its own, something that let me go once because I was taken away, but now I came back voluntarily. I walked through that door myself, and I think that means something. I think that changed something. My mother was right when she said we shouldn't have let me go back alone, but she was wrong about one thing. She said the therapists made me forget, that they convinced me it had all been imagination. But I don't think I forgot at all. I think part of me always remembered. I think that's why I didn't visit after I turned 10, why I never asked to go back. Why the idea of inheriting that house filled me with a dread I couldn't explain until I was standing in that basement, holding those impossible videos. Some part of me remembered being loved by something that shouldn't exist. Some part of me remembered the feeling of being chosen, being special, being seen by something that most people couldn't see. And some part of me liked it. That's the thought that keeps me awake at night. Not the fear of what might be out there waiting for me, but the memory of how it felt to be the center of that attention, how safe it felt, how loved, even while some deeper instinct screamed at me to run. I think that's why she's patient, because she knows what I'm only beginning to understand, that eventually the fear will fade. Eventually I'll start to rationalize what happened, convince myself it was stress or grief or too much time alone in an empty house. Eventually, I'll start to miss it. That feeling of being important to something, of being worth waiting for. And when that happens, when I'm lonely enough or sad enough or just tired enough of pretending it didn't happen, I'll find myself driving toward Toledo. I'll find myself standing on that street corner, looking at where the house used to be, and maybe I'll feel that pull again, that sense of coming home, that certainty that something is waiting for me there, ready to pick up exactly where we left off. The scariest part isn't what happened in that house. It's knowing that she was right. This is my home in some terrible way, because she made it my home. Years ago, when I was too young to understand what was happening, she wove herself into my childhood, into my family memories, into the foundation of who I am. And you can tear down a house, but you can't tear down memory. You can run away, but you can't run from something that's already inside you. Sometimes I catch myself wondering what would have happened if I'd stayed, if I'd let her take my hand in that basement, if I'd accepted that gentle invitation to remain. Would it have been so bad? She promised she'd never hurt me. She said she loved me, and part of me, the part that still feels 7 years old and lonely and special, wants to believe her. That's the thought that terrifies me more than anything. Not that I'll be forced back, but that someday I'll choose to go back myself. Because the woman in the videos is right about one thing. We did have beautiful times together. Even if I can't consciously remember them, my body remembers. My heart remembers. And every time I throw away one of those postcards, every time I change the channel when it switches to static, I can feel it. A tiny part of me that misses her, that wants to know what it would be like to give in, to stop fighting, to finally just go home. My therapist says I'm processing trauma. She says the postcards are probably from my own mind, that I might be sending them to myself as a way of working through what happened. She says the TV thing is confirmation bias, that channels glitch all the time, and I'm only noticing it because I'm primed to look for it. She says the feeling of being watched is hypervigilance, a normal response to a frightening experience. She's probably right, she's almost certainly right. But last week I found something in my mailbox that my therapist can't explain. It was a photograph. Old, faded, the kind of Polaroid picture from the 90s. It showed me at about 8 years old sitting on my grandmother's couch in the basement. I was smiling at the camera. And there, sitting next to me with her arm around my shoulders, was the woman in the navy blue dress. We looked happy together. We looked like we belonged together. On the back of the photo, in handwriting I recognized from the postcards, it said, "I'm keeping this one, to remember you by, until you come back." I burned the photo. I watched it curl and blacken in my kitchen sink, but I can still see it when I close my eyes. The two of us together, frozen in time. And the worst part is that when I look at that memory now, I don't just feel fear. I feel something else. Something that feels dangerously close to nostalgia, to homesickness, to love. What I learned from my experience is that the places we consider safest can harbor the deepest dangers. The homes we return to for comfort can hold things that have been waiting for us far longer than we realize. We trust our childhood memories, we trust family spaces, we trust the feeling of coming home. But sometimes that trust is exactly what makes us vulnerable. I think about how many people inherit houses, how many adult children return to childhood homes to sort through deceased parents' belongings. How many of them spend nights alone in those familiar spaces, surrounded by memories? How many of them hear sounds they can't explain, see shadows that shouldn't be there, feel presences in empty rooms? Most of them probably rationalize it away. Grief, exhaustion, imagination. But what if some of them are experiencing what I experienced? What if some of them are being welcomed back by things that have been waiting patiently for their return? The truth is, we don't know what exists alongside us in these spaces we inhabit. We don't know what attaches itself to houses, to families, to children. We don't know what makes certain people visible to things that most of us can't see. And we don't know what happens when those people grow up and forget, and then come back as adults to places that remember them very well. If you ever find yourself alone in a childhood home, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, leave. Don't try to rationalize it. Don't tell yourself, you're being irrational. If your TV turns on by itself, if you hear footsteps when you're alone, if you find evidence of a past you don't remember, get out. Don't wait to understand it. Just leave. Because some things that appear kind and loving are the most dangerous of all. Some things know that the best way to keep you is to make you want to stay. Have you ever returned to a childhood home and felt like something was different? Like something in that familiar space recognized you in a way that made you uncomfortable? Have you ever had memories that don't quite fit or found evidence of experiences you can't recall? Share your story in the comments. Sometimes talking about these experiences helps us understand that we're not alone, that others have felt this same unsettling recognition from places that shouldn't be able to recognize us at all. Stay safe out there. Pay attention to your instincts, especially in places that should feel safe. And if you ever inherit a house that's been empty for years, maybe don't go there alone, because you never know what's been waiting in that emptiness, watching the doors, hoping for the day when someone familiar finally comes home. And remember, the scariest stories are always the true ones, the ones that could happen to anyone, the ones that are happening right now to people who think they're safe in their grandmother's house, their childhood bedroom, their family home, the ones where the real horror isn't what's chasing you, but what's been patiently waiting for you to stop running and come back. If you found this story unsettling, share it with someone who needs to understand the importance of trusting their instincts. And if you've ever experienced something similar, know that you're not crazy, you're not imagining things. Some places do remember us, some things do wait, and some invitations to come home are ones we should never accept.